Anjana चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् अद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवम् श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यस्य कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So welcome back to the Bhakti Tattva Vivek series, deliberations on pure devotional service. We are almost on the last class or the last class. Let us see how it goes. We are discussing, after discussing the Swarupa and Tatastha Lakshan in chapter 1 of Bhakti Tattva Vivek, and discussing in chapter 2 what is Bhakti Abhas, and in chapter 3 the characteristics of pure devotional service. In chapter 4 we have been discussing the qualifications to practice Shuddha Bhakti. So I'll just summarize because 2 weeks we could not have the discussion because of some other engagements. So I'll just summarize what we have discussed up till now. We will begin again with the Mangalacharan. Karma Jnana Viragadi Cheshtam Hitva Samantatah Shraddhavan Bhajateyam Shri Chaitanyam Aham Bhaje. I worship Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Aham Bhaje Shri Chaitanyam, who is always served by faithful devotees. Shraddhavan Bhajateyam, who have completely given up the pursuits of fruitive activity, impersonal knowledge, and dry renunciation. Cheshtam hitva samantata. Samantata means completely. What all? Karma, jnana, viragadi. So this is the Mangalacharan or the invocation verse for chapter 4, that is qualification for Bhakti. Bhaktivinoda Thakur begins by explaining how for everything we need adhikar. So there is adhikar for Shuddha Bhakti, and understanding the adhikar itself is the very foundation of success, he says. You know, the moment you understand that, to crack the IIT exam, this is what, I'll have to go through coaching, and you know that, and then you endeavor, definitely you're going to make it into the IIT. And once you're into the IIT, definitely you will pass out from the IIT, because you have taken all the trouble to enter the IIT. And then your career is assured. So sometimes that adhikar to understand is so important that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying it is the very foundation of success. So then he mentions how, you know, uh, in the karma and gan paths, bhakti is practiced as a secondary element. And that's why they cannot obtain the auspicious result of Krishna Prem. So, by only having the adhikar to practice Shuddha Bhakti and the proper qualification, then that can give rise to the result in the form of bhava. So then Bhaktivinoda Thakur goes to analyze 7.16 Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukrutino arjuna. Arto jigyasu artharti jnani cha bhartarashana. So, and then he connects that to Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, where Rupa Goswami also has spoken about these 4 types of adhikaris when they get the mercy of the pure devotee or the Lord directly. Then that Mishran will go away, and then they become qualified to practice Shuddha Bhakti. Like Gajendra was in distress, and he fervently prayed to the Lord in that distress condition, and by the mercy of the Lord, his distress was removed. He became qualified to practice Shuddha Bhakti. Remember, after having darshan of the Lord, then he became qualified to take up to Shuddha Bhakti. To take up to Shuddha Bhakti, please remember. And then he gives the example of Dhruva Maharaj, the 4 Kumaras, and Sanakadi Rishis. And then he comes to the qualification for Shuddha Bhakti. Yeha kenapi ati bhagyena jata shaddo asya sevana. By some very good fortune, that means by the association of pure devotees. That is what ati bhagyena. And then he says, gradually they develop firm faith. So they get Shraddha, but that Shraddha has to ultimately take the form of, firm faith. And this very firm faith is the root cause for eligibility for pure devotion. And then he quotes this verse, very famous verse from the Buddha Gita, Jata Shaddo Mat Katasu, Nirvinna Sarva Karmasu, Veda Dukkatmakan Kaman, Parityag Apya Anishwara, Tato Bhajet Mam Pritah, Shraddhalu Drida Nishchaya, Jushamansha Tan Kaman, Dukko Darkansha Garayan. So firm faith is there, very important. He has to remain detached from fruitive activities. And he quotes Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas, and we have gone through this. What does Shraddha mean? Shraddha is Shastrarat Vishwas. And Shastra means we have complete, we are fearless because we have taken the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. And one who has not taken shelter, there is fear. So everyone can understand within ourselves, in our heart, how much we have fear. To the degree we have not taken shelter of the Lord. Otherwise, one who has taken shelter, complete shelter of the Lord, is fearless completely. So then he mentions the Sharnapati as the Shraddha as Sharnapati. It's symptoms of the surrender. And once you have this kind of Shraddha, there is Krishna Anuvritti Cheshta. There is constant endeavor to, please Krishna. Anukulena Krishnanushilanam. Anukulena. And the tendency to perform fruitive activities is altogether removed. There is no tendency of the vritti due to sabhav. That's the point. Very important for us to understand. And then the Sharanapati, he correlates to Sarva Dharman Paritejya. So there is no performance of dharma based on our swabhava. Perform the dharma of the soul, pure devotional service. And if you remember in the last class, we mentioned how there is something called as ruchi. And I was mentioning there is the faith of the soul and there is a faith of the mind. So we have little faith of the soul because of the Sangha, but still we have faith in our Swabhava because we have our Swabhava. And in the paths of Karma and Gyan, there is always, there is that little bhakti element that is in the form of ruchi. That is what I call it as the faith of the soul. And because of this bhakti element, only the results of karma or gyan, bear, they give results. So this was what we had discussed last in our class. And then I had quoted this verse, how Rupa Goswami is also speaking in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu about Salpapi Ruchari Yasya Bhakti Tattva Havabodhika Ruchi. So this is a taste, this is the faith of the soul. Now, I will continue our discussion. This is where we stopped in our last class. So let's continue our discussion from today. And while discussing these points, if you happen to have any questions, you are free to raise your hands. Faith in the paths of karma and gyan is mixed with the taste for the activities of karma and gyan respectively. But the nature of this faith is different. I was mentioning the difference between the faith of the soul and the faith of the mind. So when we have Nishtha, I quoted, if you remember in the last class, Lokesmin Dvida Nishtha Pura Prokta Mayanaga Gyan Yogena Sankyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. So Nishtha there Prabhupada translates as faith. So you have your nature of a Kshatriya and you are having adhikar to practice Karma Yoga. You have performed Nishkam Karma Yoga, purified your heart, and your consciousness is in the mode of goodness. You are detached from fruitive activities. You don't have tendency to perform actions at all. Then you have Nishtha for Gyan. So faith in the paths of Karma and Gyan is mixed with the taste for activities of Karma and Gyan respectively. So this faith is not pure faith of the soul. There is mixed faith. That is what is the point. Only faith that is endowed with taste for bhakti culminates in the symptoms of bhakti. So this is what I was calling the faith of the soul. And Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas uses the terminology Shastriya Shraddha. Shastriya Shraddha. That is what is the term he uses. So only when you have faith of the soul and you have taste for only bhakti and not according to your sabhav, then it can culminate into the symptoms of bhakti. And this is called Sharanapati, full surrender. So when you give up the taste to perform activities based on your sabhava and exclusively do activities of the soul, which is called also as the Mukhya Vritti, that is the soul's vrittis. And you have absolutely no taste for doing according to your mental inclination. That's the right term I can put in. So then, we have attained what is called as Sharanapati or full surrender. So it's a very important point. We have to come to this point, and then from here, pure devotional service begins. And just to give you an idea, like I've been born in South India, And because of the cultural conditioning, I am attached to eating idli and dosa. I'm practicing devotional service, but I'm attached to, because of my nature, that I'm attached to that kind of food. But once you transcend your conditional nature, and you're practicing devotion, whatever is anukul for maintaining the body, you're not attached now that if I don't have idli or dosa, I cannot function. No, whatever Krishna provides, anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjan. You come to that point where you're no more dictated by the dictations of the conditional nature, and you have exclusive taste for only bhakti activities and what is favorable for surrender, then that is the point of full surrender or Sharanapati. Only when one's taste for bhakti advances through the progressive stages of sadhu sangha, performance of bhajan kriya, absence of anarthas, anarth nivriti, and finally assumes the form of nishta, does it become pure ruchi. So now please mark this and please try to understand. I don't have a chart here to explain it, but I will make it clear and I hope that you will also understand it. So once it has already been established by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and both Jeev Goswami that Shraddha is not a limb of Bhakti. Shraddha is the sole qualification to practice Ananya Bhakti. It's not a limb of Bhakti. Now, once you get that Purna Shraddha, and Shraddha is synonymous to Sharanagati. He has established that. Now then, with that surrender, you associate with sadhus who will help you to attain that goal of pure prema, that kind of sadhu sangha. And you will perform bhajan according to the instructions of the sadhus. So that's why even Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas brings out, there are different kinds of gurus. He says Shravana Guru, and then there is the Bhajana Shiksha Guru, and then there is the Diksha Guru. So the Bhajana Shiksha Gurus, you do bhajan according to your Bhajana Shiksha Gurus. So you perform this bhajan and then you quickly, uproot all the anarthas because of the intensity of bhajan, because it is not Shuddha Bhakti. Tivrena Bhakti Yogan is there. There is no avaran of karma and gyan. So because it is Tivrena, you all the anarthas, Sukrututta, Dushkututta, Apradutta, and Bhakti Utta. When you cross over these anarthas, then you come to the stage of Nishta. And after Nishta, then you reach Ruchi. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is now making a distinction between the initial stages of Ruchi and now this stage called Ruchi, and he says it is pure Ruchi, pure taste. So we all have Ruchi in Bhakti activities, but we have Ruchi in so many other things in this material world. So still the exclusive Ruchi for only performing bhajan is not there. So only when we attain that stage of Nishta and come to this next stage, then it is pure Ruchi. That's what he makes a point. This faith is a separate entity from Bhakti. Now what I said already, now Bhakti Thakur is making that point. Srila Jiva Goswami writes in Bhakti Sandarbha, Tasmach Shraddha na Bhakti Angam Kintu Karmanya Asamartha Vidvat Tavad Ananya Akhyayam Bhaktav Adhikari Visheshanam Eva. Hence, Tasmat, faith is not a limb of Bhakti. Shraddha na Bhakti Angam. Now, this might come as a surprise to many devotees, but we have to accept the statement of our Siddhanta Acharya, who is Jiva Goswami, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur is again explaining. Even Srila Prabhupada, if you carefully hear his lectures on Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavatam, I can give you many references. he mentions the ordinary Shraddha, and this Shraddha is different from the Goswami Shraddha, he says. The Goswami Shraddha. So, Shraddha is not the Anga of Bhakti. Faith is not the limb of Bhakti, but an attribute of the qualification for Bhakti. Kintu karmanya asamarth vidvat tavad ananya indifferent to the ritualistic fruity activities known as karma kanda. Karmanya asamartha vidvat tavat. Bhakti adhikari visheshanam evacha. So any questions up till now? Any clarifications? Okay. Yeah, there is one question. Minor Prabhuji, yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I'm very fortunate to come back again to your association. I just have one clarification to sort to Prabhu. So when you said that Shraddha is not an Anga of Bhakti, which is not part of 64 Angas, so it means that in 64, even if you follow few of them, you will become a pure devotee. So, but Shraddha must include in all of them.
Wait. Don't confuse with the 64 limbs of Bhakti. They are the limbs of sadhana Bhakti. Here we are speaking about adhikar to practice Bhakti. First we have to speak of adhikar, then Bhakti Angas will come later on.
Okay.
Bhakti Angas will come later on. So restrict your question to Bhakti Adhikar, not the Bhakti Angas. Don't mix the two. Got the point?
Yes, Prabhu. So this is essential requirement to enter into Bhakti.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
It is the qualification to enter into Ananya Bhakti. Okay. But Shraddha is not the limb of Bhakti. Now I'll give you a very simple example. Ajamil took the name of Narayan. So did he call Narayan with faith? No. He did not call Narayan with faith. He called his son Narayan. Still, Bhakti gave its results. So Bhakti is not dependent on Shraddha in one sense. So that's why, Jiva Goswami is making a Dasma Shraddha na Bhakti Angam. It is not a limb of Bhakti, but an attribute of a qualification for Bhakti. So it will take some digest time and energy and for us to digest the subject. Sometimes some new concepts suddenly we hear after many years of practice, and we have some kind of understanding from long time. So it becomes a little difficult. Even it took me a long time to digest and really assimilate it. But by the example of Ajamil taking the name of Narayan, it was not called out of Shraddha, but still Bhakti gave its results. So Bhakti is not dependent on Shraddha. But to practice Ananya Bhakti, Shraddha is the qualification. To practice Ananya Bhakti. So now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes this. It says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tavad karmani kurvita na nirvidyayat yavata matkata shavanadova shraddhayavan na jayate. Shri Krishna says one should continue performing his occupational devotees. Tavat karmani kurvita. As long as he has not become indifferent to them, na nirvidyayet yavata, and has not developed faith in hearing the narration of my pastime. Mat kata shravanado va shraddhayavan jayate. Now, this verse has to be very carefully understood. Of course, we'll not be going today into Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's and Prabhupada's disciples who have commented on this verse. We don't have time for that. But let us see what Bhaktivinoda Thakur has to say. The purport is that one is qualified to renounce his occupational duties only when he develops faith in hearing the narration of Krishna's pastimes. The verse is saying. This is the conclusion of the scriptures. To clarify a possible doubt here, we must note that if faith, which is the very cause for qualification for unalloyed delusion, is itself not a limb of bhakti, then how can spiritual knowledge and renunciation, which in some instances manifest before the appearance of faith, be limbs of bhakti? So there is one doubt that you have to become completely nirvide tyavata, indifferent to doing occupational duties based on your sabhava. So here the question is, for Shraddha, which is the cause for unalloyed devotion, and that itself is not a limb bhakti, then how can Gyan and Vairagya, which manifest before faith, how can they be limbs of bhakti? So that he answers through Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami says, Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. Jnana Vairagyayor Bhakti Praveshopayogita Ishat Pratamam Eveti Na Angatvam Uchitam Tayoho. In some particular instances, spiritual knowledge, Gyan, and renunciation, Vairag, may be useful while a devotee is in the initial stages of entering into bhakti, but they can never be said to be the limbs of bhakti. So bhakti is independent. Bhakti is not dependent on jnana and karma or vairagya. By practice of bhakti, jnana and vairagya are byproducts. So how can jnana and vairagya be then limbs of bhakti? No, it's not possible. It might be helpful in the initial stages of entering bhakti, but they are never the limbs of bhakti. So again, this is a vast topic. After in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami discussing the 64 limbs of devotion, then he comes to the point of what are not the limbs of devotion. He says Varnashram is not the limb of devotion. Jnana and Vairagya are not the limbs of devotion. So he brings out all that points there. So here also Bhaktivinoda Thakur is quoting it. Hence, it is an established fact that only that faith which is endowed with the symptoms of complete surrender is the cause of the qualification for pure devotion, Shuddha Bhakti. So here faith means complete faith. The Shraddha means Purna Shraddha. Shraddha means Sharanagati here. So till then you continue to hear. And once your faith reaches that point where you have where you completely become disgusted with doing any material activities, then your faith is matured, and then that is the entrance for practicing Ananya Bhakti. From there, Sarva Dharman Parityajya begins, and from there your pure devotional service begins. Till then, you continue to hear. Like, Krishna is telling, we are all, in whatever stage of life we are in now, we are practicing Krishna consciousness. We know the statement of ultimate conclusion of Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. So why still we have attachment to doing, duties to maintain our body? If we are Ananya Bhaktas, then, Yoga Kshemam Vahamyam, Krishna will take care, exclusively engage all the time in Satatam Kirtayantu Mam. No, we don't have that complete surrender and complete faith. We are in the process of development of that faith. We are in the process. So, Tavat Karmani Kurita, till then, continue with your duties. Till Na Nirvidet Yavat. So then this Shraddha refers to this stage, complete surrender, and then that is the qualification for pure devotion. Sometimes people are heard saying that faith in hearing the narrations of Krishna's pastimes is developed by some through the strict performance of their occupational duties, by some through the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, and by others through renunciation of object of the senses, vairagya. So they say this Shraddha in Mat Katha Shravanado, this, by Varnashram, by Gyan, by Vairagya, is it possible? Some people think like that. But such statements are erroneous. It is possible that these processes may be cultivated just prior to the appearance of faith. But through a more detailed analysis, it becomes apparent that somehow or another, there must have been some association with devotees just between the two instances, that is, between the cultivation of the above mentioned processes and the appearance of faith. So it is only by the association of devotees that this faith, you get that faith. And then there is a development of faith where it comes to the point of Sharanapati. That time you give up everything and exclusively engage in Ananya Bhakti. So this faith is only got in the association of devotees, and there is no other way, nor by performance of varnashram. Then karma becomes the cause of bhakti. Bhakti is transcendental and karma is material. So how can something material be cause of something which is transcendental? Or Gyan is sattvic. How can Gyan be the cause of bhakti? Or Vairagya is also sattvic. So bhakti is the cause of bhakti. The bhakti which is residing in the heart of the pure devotee, coming in association with him, that gives rise to that faith. So that is the point Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making. So he establishes this statement of here by quoting from the Bhagavatam. Yes, Mataji, have a question? Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Before we proceed further, I would like to get it clarified. Invariably, are we trying to say this that Gyan and Vairagya is not at all essential to develop unalloyed devotion or to become a pure devotee with complete surrender and complete faith?
Yes, Gyan and Vairagya is not at all essential. And in the path of Gyan, first of all, by performing Nishkama Karma Yoga, in a detached way, he becomes completely detached and he attains a stage which is called as Sthita Pragya. So in the stage of Sthita Pragya, he is completely now detached. Complete detachment from material activities. He has no inclination to perform material activities. Now, at this stage, he is qualified to take up Gyan path and practice the limbs of Gyan, in which Bhakti is also one element, and then attain the goal of liberation. So there, Vairagya is the limb of the Gyanis. It is a limb, anga of the Gyanis. Whereas Bhakti, in Bhakti, the limbs are what? There is no Vairagya limb. In Bhakti, the limbs are Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanim. The activities of Bhakti. So just by performing spiritual activities in relationship with Krishna, all these and the 64 limbs, we naturally become attached to Krishna. And the result of that is that there is natural detachment from matter. So it's a byproduct. So there is no need for us to separately endeavor. When the mind is attached to Krishna, then naturally it will be detached from matter. So that is the point Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making. I hope it is clear.
So here GAN where are we referring? I mean, we are referring to GAN. What are we referring to? GAN means.
Gyan means, here we are referring to those scriptures which speak about renunciation, which speak about the impersonal Brahman, how to attain liberation. The Upanishads, which speak about it. And Vairagya is, again becoming detached from matter, analysis, how these 24 elements, how the jiva is bound in the 24 elements and how one should become detached from it. So this is analysis. So in the Jnani path, it's an intellectual path where there is analysis, so there, that is their main, you know, uh, limbs of practice. But in bhakti, there is gyan in the form of bhakti sambandhit gyan, like how to perform the limbs of devotion. We have Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, we have Upadeshamrit. We study these bhakti literatures. This knowledge is not knowledge which will lead to impersonal liberation. This knowledge will lead to devotion. And that devotion, understanding how to perform devotion, and we acquire that knowledge and perform devotion, that will lead to further devotion. So devotion leads to devotions. But whereas the practice of the limbs of Gyan leads to liberation. So that is why that is the difference in the Gyan path. In the Bhakti path, this is, Bhakti Sambandhit Gyan. So that's why there is the difference between the two. And that's why in the Srimad Bhagavatam 1-7, Vasudeve Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Janeti Ashu Vairagyam, Yanam Tad Ahetukam. This knowledge, realized knowledge about the Lord, is ahetuki. There is no hetu. The Jnanis practice the Jnana path with a hetu, with a purpose so that to attain liberation. Whereas the Bhakti Sambandhit Gyan of reading Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, it increases our devotion. It doesn't lead to the goal of liberation. It leads to our more attachment to Krishna and to develop love for Krishna. So this is why it is called as ahetuki Gyan. It is Gyanam Yad Ahetukam. And there is natural detachment because there is attachment to Krishna. So that is the difference between the two. Is it okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
So now to establish or substantiate what Bhaktivinoda Thakur said in the previous statement, that it is only by association of devotees, he gives a very famous and classic quotation from the Bhagavatam. This is a very famous verse, and this verse has to be discussed quite elaborately, which again time doesn't permit, but sometime we can discuss this verse elaborately. In this context, the following verse from Srimad Bhagavatam is worthy of consideration. Bhava pargo brahmato yada bhavet janasya tar achut sat samagamaha satsangamo yari tadaiva sadgato paravareshe vai jayate matihi. Sri Muchukund said, this is Muchukund speaking after he had darshan of the Lord, his prayers. Oh my dear infallible Lord, Achyuta, becoming opposed to you, the living entity sometimes attains worldly sense pleasure by pursuing the path of karma and sometimes attains liberation to the cultivation of jnana. Bhavo parga brahmato yada bhavet. Thus, he is entangled in the repeated cycle of birth and death. If, while wandering in this way, the living entity somehow becomes fortunate and receive the association of your devotees. Janasya tarhi achut sat samagama. With great determination, he fixes his intelligence at your lotus feet, understanding you to be the only shelter of saintly persons, the original of all creations, both material, spiritual, and ultimate. Satsangamo yari tadaiva sadgatau paravarashat tvai jayate. So this is a very beautiful verse. It mentions how the jiva wandering, when he comes in the association of the devotees, then his material existence is dissolved and he'll develop, jayate mati. He'll develop attraction to you. He'll develop love for you. Thus, fruitive activity, the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, renunciation, and so on can never be the cause of appearance of faith. Only the association of devotees can cause the appearance of Shraddha. So, Janasya tarhi achyuta sat samagamo. Just only association of devotees can give rise to Shraddha. This is the conclusion, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur is substantiating this by quoting this verse from the Bhagavatam. In this regard, Srila Rupa Goswami has composed lines such as Yena kenapi ati bhagyena jhata shraddho asya sevane. Thus, only persons endowed with Shraddha are the rightful candidates for unalloyed devotion. Jhata Shraddha. So this is, up till now, he has concluded that the qualification to practice is Shraddha. Shraddha is synonymous to Sharana Gati. So any questions now? He takes the subject now. Yes, once you get the qualification to practice Ananya Bhakti, now within Bhakti, Ananya Bhakti, there is, Sadhana Bhakti. Within Sadhana, there is Vaidya and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. So that's why he's going to now define Vaidya and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. So any questions, any clarifications up till now? So then we'll go ahead. Virendra Yadav Prabhuji has a question. Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhu, just one clarification. Now with this description of Pur Shraddha, it is clear that since we have not developed full faith, so it is very clear that we have not entered in the line of pure devotion, Ananya Bhakti. So it is below that, it is only karmis, or it is mostly karmis bhakti what we are practicing right now.
Well, it is for one's own evaluation, and one has to introspect himself. And most important is we get a very clear understanding that what actually is the adhikar to practice Ananya Bhakti. And once we know that this is the adhikar, and now where I stand, it is for one to introspect. So we are practicing Sakshat Bhakti, direct Bhakti, in the form of, some time of the day we are engaged in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. These are direct devotional activities. And sometimes during the day we are reading Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. But other times of the day, based on our mental inclination, we are performing activities. So that time the bhakti becomes mixed. There is avaran happening. So the ananyata of the bhakti breaks there. But according to the definition of Uttama Bhakti, ahetuki apratiyata. Apratiyata means it should be uninterrupted. So even sadhana bhakti, whether it is cheshta, rupa or bhava, cheshta means endeavor with body, mind and words. The endeavor should be continuous. Anukulena Krishna Anu. So once we are clear and have a very clear understanding, it's like, the tunnel on the other side is completely now well lit. You're not in darkness now. But if you are in darkness and you think that what path I have taken, what path I'm traversing through, this will lead me to the real goal, then we are in illusion. But 90% of our endeavor is to really understand that torchlight of knowledge is required. And with that torchlight of knowledge, we have understood. Now, once we know it, now, having that knowledge is like 50%, the battle is won. Now, when it will happen again, by the mercy of the devotees, mercy of Krishna, we will get that adhikar and come to that. It might take few years or many years or few lifetimes, but it is a question of time. But once we have a clear conception and we are clear about the goal, we are done in one sense. I hope this satisfies you.
Yes, bro. Thank you, bro. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, bro.
Okay. Okay, so now having discussed Shraddha as the qualification for Ananya Bhakti, now this Ananya Bhakti has two divisions, sadhana. Within sadhana, there is Vaidhi and Raganuga. So then he comes to that point. There is another consideration here. Sadhana Bhakti is of two types, Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, as confirmed in this verse from Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. Vaidhi Raganuga Cheti Sadvida Sadhana Vidha. Sadhana Bhakti has these two divisions. It is essential to understand the difference between Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, because without this understanding, there may remain some suspicions that can harm the development of one's bhakti. Very important, we should know this difference. Concerning Vaidhi Bhakti, Rupa Goswami is written, Yatra Rag Anavaptatvat Pravritterupajayate Shashaneva Shastrasya Savidhi Bhakti Ruchyate. Bhakti is the living entity's natural inclination and the inseparable occupation of his intrinsic nature. Intrinsic means, the soul's nature. In the conditioned stage, the jiva is opposed to Bhagwan and becomes attached to worldly enjoyment presented by the illusionary energy. As the living entity becomes immersed in worldly pleasure, his natural inclination to render loving devotional service unto Krishna becomes dormant. The jiva is fully satisfied only when, by some good fortune, his intrinsic rag or strong loving attachment for Krishna reawakens. However, it may happen when prema appears, rag naturally appears alongside it. But the rag or attachment for material sense objects that is visible in the conditioned soul is a distorted rag, not pure rag. So we can all, analyze what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying. We all have, there is one devotee was telling me, we have what, natural, the senses have spontaneous attraction towards sense objects. So there is spontaneous, in one sense, conditional activities of senses and sense objects interaction. By practice of Vaidhi Bhakti, restricting them, when the senses get purified, then the senses are spontaneously attracted to the spiritual sense object, that is Krishna. So from spontaneous sense attraction to regulated devotional service, then we come to what is what? Spontaneous devotion. So that is a point Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making here. That is the point maybe he's making here about the rag, distorted rag and not pure. In this stage, the inborn rag of the living entity remains covered or dormant. To awaken this inherent rag, the acceptance of spiritual instruction is essential. Sometimes we cannot understand the flow of what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is discussing. He is actually, defining this, definition of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. There is a natural inclination of the jiva towards the soul's natural inclination is to flow of consciousness towards the Supreme Soul. But in the conditioned stage, there is a tendency to enjoy sense objects. And that's why, there is it is this natural rag is in one sense dormant. It is covered now. And this is a distorted raga. This is not pure raga. And it is now dormant and covered. Now to awaken this, dormant raga, you have to follow the instructions, shashan. You have to follow the shashan of the spiritual master's instructions. That's why one of the first limbs of bhakti, first three limbs are most important. That we have to accept the spiritual master and follow his instructions and serve the spiritual master. So these become the important limbs of bhakti and to develop that natural pure rag. The Vedas and their subordinate literatures are storehouses of such instructions. The bhakti that is performed within the framework of the instructions of the scriptures is called Vaidhi Bhakti. So I hope now you can understand the flow of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's thought, how he has defined Vaidhi Bhakti. Now I will give a brief review of Raganuga Bhakti. Now any questions before we go into the definition of Raganuga Bhakti? I hope you are able to follow how Bhaktivinoda Thakur presented what is Vaidhi Bhakti. Any questions on this? Okay. Oh, my Narsimha Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji.
So Prabhuji, as I understood that, is it bhakti is inherent, means this pure devotion service, which is covered as you told now. So that is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying. It is inherently present in the jiva, or bhakti is eccentric, means like it is need to be acquired by the jiva by practice of this angas.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statement, if you see and hear very carefully, he's saying bhakti is the living entity's what? Natural inclination and the inseparable occupation of his intrinsic nature. The soul, by naturally and spontaneously is attracted to the Supreme Soul. But now because of the covering of Maya, its attraction is towards the material world. It's towards the material world. So now that is it's lying in a dormant state. Now how to awaken it? By the process of following the rules and regulations. That's the point. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So let's now go to definition of Raganuga. Now I will give a brief review of Raganuga Bhakti. Srila Jiva Goswami writes in Bhakti Sandarbha, Tatra Visha na Swabhaviki Vishaya Samsarga Chatatishaya Maya Premaraga Yata Chakshur Adinam Saundaryado Adrisha Evatra Bhaktasya Shri Bhagavatya Api Raga Iti Uchyate. The powerful, loving affection that naturally develops within a materialistic person by his affiliation to the object of the sense pleasure is called rag. Just as eyes, chakshu, become excited upon seeing any beautiful form, chakshu adinam saundaryado, the similar inclination of the devotee towards Krishna is called rag. So this we have experienced how the materialist person naturally when he sees something beautiful, his attraction is immediately drawn towards the sense objects. Similarly, when that naturally comes towards Krishna, then it is rag. Naturally the attraction flows towards Krishna. That is now the soul, the conditioned illusionary energy is not acting now. He is free from the conditioning and the soul's natural consciousness, Krishna consciousness is awakened. The natural inclination of the soul is awakened. So is naturally everything what he sees it as Krishna only. He doesn't see anything. Stavar deki, jangam deki, na deki tara murti, sarvatra hoy, ishtadevaspu. So that's how he comes to that point. The taste that develops from following the footsteps of a personality who possesses natural affinity for such rag is called Raganuga Bhakti. So when we follow in the footsteps of personality who possess this, that is the eternal associates, the Vrajvasis, Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda, Sridhama, Sudama, the Gopis, they have this natural rag. They are Ragatmika Bhaktas. And when we start following their footsteps, we become Raganuga. We practice Raganuga Bhakti. That is the definition of Raganuga Bhakti. Raganuga Bhakti means following in the footsteps of Ragatmika Bhaktas. Ragatmika Bhaktas are who have intense rag for Krishna. So that is the point. Regarding the qualification, regarding the qualification for second. Regarding the qualification for Ragana Bhakti, Srila Jiva Goswami writes, Ragatmika eka nishta ye vrajavasi janadayah tesham bhavapatvaye lubdo bhavet atra adhikarivan tat tat tad bhavadi madhurye shute dhiryat apekshate natram shastram na yuktim cha tallobotpatti lakshanam. The Vrajvasi sentiments for Krishna are the most exalted and exceptional example of Ragatmika Bhakti. Vrajvasi Janadu, Ragatmika Nishta. Such sentiments cannot be seen anywhere other than Vraj. The fortunate soul who develops the greed to attain sentiments for Krishna, such as those displayed by the Vrajvasis, is the rightful candidate for Raganuga Bhakti. Tesham bhavate lubdo. Lubdo means greed. Bhavet adhikar. He becomes, qualified to now practice Raganuga Bhakti. Despite having heard about the sweetness of such sentiments, tat tad bhavadi madhurya, one cannot enter into them until he becomes greedy for them. Lubdo. Lubdo means greed, lob. This is spiritual greed, not material greed. The sole cause for the qualification of practice of Ragana Bhakta is spiritual greed, not the careful study of scriptures or the skillful use of Rajik. Again, this is a very vast and elaborate topic about Raganuga Bhakti, which we have discussed as a separate series of lectures. You can refer to that. What it really means, not careful study of scriptures and skillful use of logic. He'll still use logic. He'll still study scriptures, but his impetus to study scriptures is to attain that mood of the Vrajvasis. He's impelled by that mood to study the pastimes of Krishna, especially the 10th canto. So there is a difference, not that because he needs some intellectual nourishment. Thus, we can understand that faith is the only cause for the qualification for Vaidhi Bhakti. Similarly, greed is the only cause for qualification for Ragana. So, mark these statements. Adhikar for practicing Ragana Bhakti is spiritual greed. Adhikar for practicing Vaidhi Bhakti is faith. Faith means Purna Shraddha. And faith is synonymous to Sharanagati. Now, there are types of faith. Let us go into that. Here, a doubt may arise concerning whether the faith that has been previously established as the cause for eligibility for unalloyed devotion is incomplete. If that faith is the cause of eligibility only for one type of bhakti, then why has it been said to be the cause of eligibility for all types of bhakti? To dispel such a doubt, it is again stressed that faith is the only cause for the qualification for pure devotion. For pure devotion. In the absence of faith, no variety of Shuddha bhakti can ever appear. The conclusion is that Shastra Vishwasmai Shraddha, or Shraddha derived from Shastra in the injunctions of the scriptures, Bhakti literature especially, is the only cause for the qualification of Vaidhi Bhakti, and Bhava Madhurya Lobhamaya Shraddha, or faith derived from intense greed to experience the sweet sentiments of the Vrajvasis, is the only cause for qualification for Raganuga. Only faith, whether it be Vishwasmai or Lobhamai, is the cause of the eligibility for both types of pure bhakti, whether it is Vaidhi or Raganuga. So that's the point he makes about these two types of faith. Now, the next topic is very interesting. Qualification is determined by the degree of faith. Now, faith is there, but there are degrees in it. So we can discuss this topic, but again, if you have any questions on up till now what we have discussed. Any questions, any clarifications? There is one question. Yes, Virendra Dapaji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandat Prabhu. Prabhu, this Raganuga Bhakti, it can be said it is Bhava stage, Prabhu?
1 second, sorry. Yeah. Come again.
Prabhu, I'm saying that this Raga practice of Raganuga Bhakti, it's a Bhava stage?
See, there is no exact mention that it is at Bhava stage. Bhava Bhakti starts at Bhava stage. So please understand that Sadhana Bhakti has these two divisions, Vaidhi and Raganuga. And Sadhana Bhakti is up till Asakti. And Bhava Bhakti is Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti is Prema Bhakti. Now, within these stages, within the Sadhana Bhakti, there is Sadhu Sangha, Anarth Nivritti, Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti. So these levels, these different stages are there. Now, at what stage Raganuga Sadhana begins? That is usually and generally said that after Anarth Nivritti. So in one sense, Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti. Nishta, Ruchi and Asakti are the stages of Raganuga Sadhana. And from Sadhu Sangha, after once we have attained that Shraddha as a eligibility to practice Shuddha Bhakti, then there is Sadhu Sangha, Bhajan Kriya and Anartha Vritti. That will fall under Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Now again, if you go more in depth, it's not that a Vaidhi Sadhaka doesn't have Rag. Rag means, spontaneous attraction. We have attraction, to some deities. Sometimes devotees, I know devotees who just fly from one part of the country to another part of the country, just 2-3 days, just to be in Mayapur to have darshan of Radha Madhav or to Vrindavan. And sometimes, we have some taste for some activities in devotion. There is some natural, spontaneous taste for it. So we have that. There is, a combination within Vaidhi also. There is Rag, but Raganuga as a sadhana, it requires that adhikar, and that adhikar has been said as intense greed. So that happens with the purification of the heart when one has crossed Anarth Nivritti. That is my understanding, and whatever till now I have come across about, whatever our acharyas have said, and the contemporary acharyas have said about it. I hope it is clear, Prabhuji.
Right, true, right, true. That means when we say intense greed, I understand it may be nishtha
Purity
only
of the
because
heart. Purity of
yes,
the heart. When you attain
so
a certain level of purity of the heart, when you are free from the effect of the modes, you are free from material greed, material lust, and all that, and you have developed spiritual greed.
then it could be nishtha stage, bro. Then
Yes, that's what I mentioned with the purification of the heart after anartha nivritti.
Right, bro. Right. Thank you, bro. Thank you very much.
Sadhana begins, Raganuga sadhana begins, but as I mentioned, within practice of Vaidya also, we have certain rag. We have attraction to Mayapur Dham, we have attraction to particular deities. So it's a, it's not a watertight classification, but the combination is there. It's like 80% Vaidhi, 10%, 90% Vaidhi and 10% rag. And then it goes on, 60% Vaidhi, 40%. And then at a particular point, it becomes more of a Raganuga sadhana, and the Vaidhi, comes down. And more the activities are performed out of spontaneity. Is it clear, Prabhuji?
Right, bro. Thank you, bro. Thank you very much, bro.
Okay. So there are only now, I have to only cover 8 slides, and that will complete the syllabus. So I would like to complete, and maybe I will just take 10 extra more minutes so that we can finish this. And it is quite a simple discussion. There are 3 types of rightful candidates for Vaidhi Bhakti: Uttama, Madhyama, Kanishta, as confirmed by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Uttama Madhyamascha Syat Kanishtas Cheti Sa Tridha. There are 3 who are qualified for, please remember, Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. In this, there are 3 levels. The symptoms of Uttamadhikari in Vaidhi Bhakti are Shastre Yukto Cha Nipuna Sarvata Drida Nishchaya Praudha Shaddo Adhikariya Sabhakto Uttamo Mataha. When one is conversant with the scripture, Shastrayukto Cha Nipuna, expert in all types of logic, Shastrayukti, and possessing unwavering determination, Drida Nishchaya, is a Uttamadhikari endowed with firm faith, proud Shraddha. His Shraddha is what? Proud, matured faith. The symptoms of Madhyagam Adhikari in Vaidhi Bhakti are Yah Shastradishu Anipuna Shraddhavan Satu Madhyama. One who is not so expert in understanding the scripture, Anipuna Shastradishu, and yet is faithful, is a Madhyamadhikari. Shraddhavan. He possesses a lot of Shraddha. He is a Madhyamadhikari. In other words, although when presented with difficult arguments, he is unable to answer them, within his mind, he remains firmly faithful to his own principle. The symptoms of Kanishta Adhikari are Yo bhaved komala shraddha sa kanishto nigatyate. Novice devotees, I have very little expertise in understanding the scriptures, and their faith is very delicate, komala shraddha, and immature. Their faith can be changed by others' logic and arguments. It is to be noted here that the Shraddha visible in these 3 types of faithful persons is characterized by faith in the injunctions of the scriptures and by being mixed with logical evidences that are dependent on the scriptures. Shastrata Vishwas. Shraddha in the statement of the scriptures. Krishna is saying, Yogakshemam Vahamyam. I will take care of it. So how much faith we have in the statement of Krishna? So that is Shraddha. According to the degree of greed possessed by the rightful candidates for Raganuga Bhakti, they can also be divided into 3 categories: Uttama, Madhyama, Kanishta. Now, this is a very new understanding I got. That Vaidhi also there is Uttama, Madhyama, Kanishta, and Raganuga also there are levels. The conclusion is that every human being has a right to perform these. So that's it. He keeps a very short discussion on the adhikar, but now he is concluding the whole essay now. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and Antejas, untouchables, Grahastas, Brahmacharis, Vanaprasthas, and Sannyasis, all of them can be qualified for bhakti if they have faith in the injunctions of scriptures and the instructions of sadhu and guru. They come in the association of pure devotees and have faith in bhakti literatures. Either an educated person through the study of the scriptures or an uneducated person through hearing the principles of the scriptures in the association of devotees is said to have developed faith when he realizes the supremacy of bhakti as described in scriptures. Alternatively, if one develops lobamai shraddha by continually hearing the narrations of Bhagwan's pastimes in the association of devotees, while desiring to follow in the footsteps of Ragatmika devotees of Vraj, then it can be said that he has acquired the qualification to perform Shuddha Bhakti. The qualification for pure devotion cannot be achieved by the process of impersonal knowledge, renunciation, philosophical analysis, religious discussion, self-control, or meditation. It can be only got by the association of pure devotees. Despite receiving initiation, please remember now this point is very striking. Despite receiving initiation, that is Diksha, into a bona fide disciplinary succession, one cannot enter into the previous discussed Uttama Bhakti or Shuddha Bhakti or Ananya Bhakti or Kevala until he becomes an Uttama Adhikari. So from Kanishta in the Vaidhi sadhana stage, you have to come to Madhyama and come to Uttama. Until that time, one's bhakti can said to be a semblance of devotion. So until that time, the bhakti is not bhakti, it is bhakti abhas. There is a great necessity to strive for the stage of Uttam Vikari. Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama, Shraddhanusari. Shraddhanusari. So you have to graduate from Kanishta, come to Madhyama, and then come to Uttama. This is possible only when one engages in hearing and chanting in the association of devotees. Just keep on regularly hearing, chanting, and then slowly you will go up. We should never think that because that one becomes a Uttamadhikari simply by diligently practicing hearing and chanting, and then displaying the symptoms of shedding tears, trembling, and dancing. Because these symptoms can also manifest in Bhakti Abhas. We saw that when whatever little softening of the heart and determination to realize one's inherent identity that are visible in the beginning stages of pure bhakti are far superior to a display of symptoms such as falling unconscious and so on that arise as a result of pursuing the path of the abhas. Therefore, we should strive to attain unalloyed devotion with the utmost care. We should make a special effort to pursue the proper method to attain the qualification of bhakti. Otherwise, there is no possibility of attaining the eternal association of one. So he summarizes now in the form of following verses which Bhaktivinoda Thakur has composed. Vishwa Vaishnava Das puts forward the following verses. That is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Shraddha Lobhatmaka Ya Sa Vishwasrupini Tad Yada Jayate Tada Bhakto Rimatrasya Adhikaritava. When Shraddha, that is based either on faith in the injunctions of scriptures or greed to follow in the footsteps of the Ragatmika Bhakta appears in the heart, a person attains the qualification for pure devotion. So the Shraddha should be Shastrata Vishwas or Shastri Shraddha or Lobamai Shraddha. Na Sankyam, na cha Vairagyam, na Dharmo, na Bahugyata Kevalam Sadhu Sangoyam Hetu Shaddodai Dhruvam. The appearance of faith is not caused by renunciation, pursuing of process of enumeration, that is Sankhya, strictly adhering to the occupational duties corresponding to one's caste and stage of life, dharma, or becoming a scholar, yata. The sole cause of appearance of faith is the association of a sadhu who has deep love for the narration of Krishna's pastimes. Shravanadi vidhanena sadhu sangena balena cha anartopagame shigram shraddha nishtatmika bhavet. When faith appears, one becomes a kanishtadhikari. When one executes the limbs of sadhana bhakti, such as hearing, and when by the influence of sadhu sang one becomes free from the anarthas and his faith becomes dense and transforms into nishtha, one develops the intermediate qualification madhyamadhikari for annala devotion. So with that shraddha, which is the entry door to devotion, he is at the level of kanishtadhikari. And in the sadhu sangha, his anarthas very quickly are dispelled. And when he comes to the stage of nishtha, then now he's a madhyam adhikari. Nishtha piruchitam prapta shuddha bhaktya adhikaritam dadati sadake nityam esha pratha sanatano. The sadhaka within whom such ruchi has developed is called an uttamadhikari. So at the stage of ruchi, he is a uttamadhikari. Now uttamadhikari as an adhikari to practice Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. These uttama, kanishta and madhyama definitions of the adhikaris to practice Shuddha Bhakti. Only such an uttamadhikari attains unalloyed devotion. Mark this statement. This is the eternal process, sanatana, for the attainment of Shuddha Bhakti. Asat sango atava bhakto aparadha krite sati shraddhapi vilayam yati katam syat shuddha bhaktita. But if during the execution of this gradual process of sadhana, one keeps the bad association of those who are attached to sense pleasure, asat sango, or those attached to impersonal conception of the absolute truth, or if one disrespects a pure devotee, aparadh, or commits any other offense to him, faith at the novice level as well as that of the internet will dry up from its very root, and the sadhaka will be unable to achieve pure devotion. So how much we should be careful while cultivation of pure devotion about aparadh. In such a condition, the sadhaka is either entangled in chaya bhakti abhas, or in the case of committing numerous offenses, even glides down to pratibimb bhakti abhas. So you can adhere to Mayavad philosophy, or your bhakti becomes chaya bhakti abhas. Atha shraddhavata karyam Savadanam palapyataye anyata na bhavet bhakti shraddha prema palatmika. Therefore, atha, until one attains the stage of uttamadhikari, that is the stage of ruchi, the faithful and sincere sadhaka should remain extremely careful, savadan. Otherwise, it is very difficult to achieve pure devotion. Anyata na bhavet bhakti. Bhakti means Shuddha Bhakti, which ultimately bears the fruit of divine love. Shraddha, which will give to prema palatmika. Shri Krishna Arpanam Astu. May this treatise be an offering unto Shri Krishna. So this is the end of Bhakti Tattva Vivek, analysis of the nature of Bhakti by Srila Bhakti Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Chapter 4 we have finished in the entire series. So it's just short 10 minutes more than time, but it was worth it because just for discussing this last 8 slides, we would not have another class. So any questions, any clarifications? on this last composition of verses explaining all these stages. Any questions or any clarifications? Okay, so then we will stop here.